In 2002, Mitsubishi sold over 345,000 cars in the United States. Last year, they sold under 95,000. That's not a slow decline. That's a company losing nearly 3 out of every 4 customers it used to have. And here's the part almost nobody talks about. Mitsubishi didn't lose those customers to a bad economy or a scandal that made headlines for a week and blew over. They lost them to one of the most reckless financial decisions any car company has ever made on American soil. A decision so bad it's still being taught as a cautionary tale today, and the strange part is, Mitsubishi never actually left America. There was no dramatic exit, no press conference, no farewell tour. The brand just quietly stopped trying. Fewer models, older platforms, shrinking dealerships, a company slowly fading out of a market it once nearly cracked wide open. By the end of this video, you'll understand exactly what that one decision was, why it worked so well it almost destroyed the company, and why, 20 years later, Mitsubishi still hasn't recovered. Stick around, because the number they were chasing when this all started will make the whole disaster make sense. To understand how far Mitsubishi fell, you have to understand how close it came to actually competing with the big names. Through the late 1990s and into the early 2000s, Mitsubishi was on a genuine roll in America. The Eclipse was a legitimate icon of the sport compact scene. The car street racers actually wanted the car that showed up in movies and video games because it looked fast even sitting still. The Lancer Evolution built a cult following among enthusiasts who cared more about all-wheel drive rally performance than badge prestige. And the Galant, Mitsubishi's mid-size family sedan, was quietly putting up real numbers. Nearly 100,000 units in a single year at its peak. By 2002, all of that momentum added up to Mitsubishi selling more than 345,000 vehicles in the United States in a single year. For context, that's not far off from what an established, well-known brand should be doing. Mitsubishi wasn't Toyota or Honda, but for a brief window, it genuinely looked like it might become the next Japanese automaker to break into America's top tier. Then, in an effort to push that number even higher, Mitsubishi's American financing arm made a decision that would define the company for the next 2 decades. It was called the 000 program. 0% down, 0% interest, 0 payments for the first 12 months. Read that again, because it's worth sitting with. You could walk onto a Mitsubishi lot with no down payment, no credit check that actually mattered, and drive away in a brand new car and not owe the company a single dollar for an entire year. On paper, the goal was simple and, frankly, brilliant in the short term. Blow the doors off the competition on accessibility, flood the market with new drivers, and push Mitsubishi's annual sales target all the way up to 500,000 vehicles. If Honda and Toyota were winning on reputation and reliability, Mitsubishi would win on pure, frictionless access. Anyone could get a Mitsubishi. Nobody had to prove they could actually afford one. And it worked. Showrooms filled up, sales spiked. For a moment, it looked like the gamble was paying off exactly as planned. But a financing program that ignores whether the customer can actually pay isn't really a sales strategy. It's a delayed bill. And 12 months later, that bill came due all at once. Here's the number that turns this from risky business decision into full-blown financial disaster. When that grace period ended and the first real payments came due, Mitsubishi didn't just see a wave of late payments. They saw a wave of buyers who simply never had the ability to pay in the first place, and the hole that left in the company's books ran into the hundreds of millions of dollars. By handing out 000 financing without properly screening who could actually afford the car a year later, Mitsubishi had essentially given away hundreds of thousands of vehicles to customers who were never going to be able to pay for them. When the deferred payments finally kicked in, defaults hit at a scale the company hadn't planned for. Buyers who could never have qualified for a normal auto loan simply stopped paying, and Mitsubishi was left holding the vehicles back. Except now those cars were a year old, worth noticeably less than new, and the company had collected essentially nothing for them. It's the exact same trap that would later blow up the entire US housing market a few years later. just on a much smaller car size scale, and Mitsubishi hit it first. Mitsubishi had been covering up known vehicle defects for years rather than issuing recalls, quietly hiding complaints instead of fixing the problems. American buyers who'd been drawn in by the free money financing were now reading headlines questioning whether the cars themselves were even safe. Two disasters stacked on top of each other in the same short window. Sales that had peaked above 345,000 units in 2002 fell 26% in 2003, then another 37% the following year, then another 23% after that. 4 consecutive years of decline, compounding on top of each other, while the rest of the American auto industry stayed relatively stable around them. By 2009, as the broader financial crisis hit every automaker, Mitsubishi's U.S. sales had collapsed all the way down to under 54,000 vehicles. A company that had been flirting with the big leagues 7 years earlier, now smaller than some single popular models from its competitors. Here's what makes Mitsubishi's story different from a lot of other automotive collapses. The company never actually left. It just never really came back either. There was no bankruptcy filing that killed the brand outright, like Pontiac. No dramatic announcement of discontinuation. Instead, Mitsubishi settled into something quieter and in some ways more painful to watch. A permanent state of just barely hanging on. New product investment slowed to a trickle. Iconic nameplates that once defined the brand, the Eclipse, the Lancer Evolution, the Galant, were gradually discontinued and never meaningfully replaced. By the mid-2000s, Mitsubishi's entire American lineup had shrunk down to a handful of aging SUVs and a bargain bin subcompact, the Mirage, that mostly sold because it was simply the cheapest new car you could buy, not because anyone was excited about it. The damage compounded on itself for years. Dealers, frustrated by an aging lineup with no clear updates coming, began walking away. By 2026, Mitsubishi had lost more than 50 dealerships since 2019, a steeper decline than almost any other mainstream brand in the country. The ones that remained leaned increasingly on fleet and rental sales just to keep the lights on, with close to 60% of some quarters' sales going straight to rental companies instead of individual buyers who might have actually built brand loyalty. A brand cannot rebuild trust with everyday drivers while quietly admitting its main customer is a rental counter at the airport. Mitsubishi's own leadership has openly acknowledged the problem. Company executives have described a network that could shrink even further before it has any real chance of growing again. And dealers themselves have been remarkably blunt in interviews, describing a company that keeps promising new products that either arrive years late or don't arrive at all. So did Mitsubishi ever technically give up on America? Not on paper. There's no headline announcing Mitsubishi exits U.S. market. The cars are still there. The dealerships, fewer as they are, still open every morning. But there's a difference between staying in a market and actually competing in it. A company that keeps selling the same handful of aging models year after year, leans on rental fleets to hit its numbers, and lets its dealer network quietly shrink for the better part of a decade, isn't really fighting for American customers anymore. It's just maintaining a presence, collecting whatever leftover sales come its way while directing its real investment and ambition somewhere else. And that's exactly what happened. Mitsubishi's global business never disappeared. It remains genuinely strong across Southeast Asia, parts of Africa, and South America. Markets where the brand still launches exciting new products and actually competes for market share. America simply stopped being worth that same level of investment ever since one reckless financing decision blew a $454 million hole through the company's credibility and its balance sheet in the same 18-month window. Mitsubishi didn't get pushed out of America. It just quietly decided America wasn't worth fighting for anymore. And 2 decades later, it still hasn't changed its mind. If you want to see the car brand that made almost the exact same reckless financing mistake and actually didn't survive it, that video is linked right here. And if you ever owned a Mitsubishi, the Eclipse, the Evo, even a Mirage, let me know in the comments which one and whether you'd buy another one today.